Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on how you go about establishing your POV, and this will give you an introduction into it. The later videos will go into a little bit more detail and look at other areas. But if you're new to the channel, make sure you click on the subscribe button so you get notifications when new videos come online. And this is a little bit longer than some of the other videos, so let's get to it. We're going to talk about how you go about developing your point of view, and we're going to look through some artworks, and I'll just talk through them and give you my perspective. Now, all the artworks I'm going to show you are works that I particularly like. Now, I'm not saying that these are works that you should like, and you may not like any of them, you may like some of them, but whatever your perspective is on these artworks, doesn't matter, as long as you look at it and just get a bit of an idea of how you go about building up your repertoire. Before I get started, I'm just going to go through some of the things that I like and that are part of my POV, and that I use when I'm drawing on different elements to put together a visual style. Let's talk about landscapes, in particular Constable, Turner and Bierstadt. Now, Constable's an English painter. I like all his work because of the way he treats clouds, and I'll get into that a little bit later on, but his use of the way he paints clouds and the skies that he puts into his British landscapes look fantastic. And so every time I'm doing a landscape, I want to get cloud structures that are similar to the way he paints them in his landscapes. The other one is Turner. Now, Turner's landscapes are a little bit abstract, or very abstract, and they're just swirls of paint and swirls of colour and texture, and there's no real shape or form to them. But I like the textural quality of it and the abstract quality of it, so I try to inject that into landscapes as much as I can as well. And then the other one's Bierstadt. Bierstadt was an American painter. He was in the Hudson River School, and he painted the American West. But he painted it in all sorts of unusual weather conditions, always like either an approaching storm, a passing storm, sunrise, sunset, always some sort of, he never shot it with clear blue skies and bright sunny days. And his paintings are sensational. So whenever I'm doing a landscape, in the back of my mind is also Albert Bierstadt. Now, on portraits, Rembrandt and Caravaggio. Rembrandt and Caravaggio both lit portraits in a similar way, or painted portraits in a similar way. However, Rembrandt had a lot more shadow detail, whereas Caravaggio had less shadow detail. That was probably due to environmental differences. Caravaggio being in Italy with much harder sun and deeper shadows, and Rembrandt being in Holland where colder weather, interiors, smoke-filled rooms, a lot more diffusion, so softer light and more detail in the shadows. But whenever I'm doing interiors, or especially close-ups, I'm always thinking of Rembrandt and Caravaggio. Now, for interiors, again, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, Rubens, Bruegel, and I tend to lean a little bit more towards the Flemish painters, because with them, again, it's the feeling that their rooms are filled with smoke, so there's a lot of diffusion of the natural light coming through the windows. That blows out into the shadows, gives you a lot of shadow details, and you really don't have deep saturated blacks. There's always some sort of shadow detail in the darker areas in their paintings. So that gives you a bit of an idea of just a rough overview of some of the things that go on in my mind when I'm putting together a visual style or when I'm lighting a scene. So all this stuff goes in and gets mixed around and churned up and then spat out, and eventually gives you the visual style for the project that you're working on. But enough about what determines my visual style. Let's look through these paintings, and what I want you to do is, as we're looking through them, think about the characteristic curve, where the highlights go, where the shadows go, where the midtones go, and on each of these paintings, in your mind, overlay the characteristic curve and see where you would place all the values if someone said to you, I want you to duplicate that painting. So here we go. Okay, what we've got here is a constable, and what I like about constable is the colours largely, the nice soft earth tones that he uses throughout his paintings. But one of the big things Constable is famous for, and also Gainsborough, is their fantastic English countrysides with terrific cloud structure. And in terms of our filming, getting cloud structure like that used to be quite hard because we had such low latitude film stocks, and they couldn't record the brightness levels in the sky very accurately, so we would tend to burn the skies out and not have much cloud details. So to be able to use digital cameras with wide latitudes and especially a lot of overexposure latitude and capture skies like that is fantastic. And this is another constable, and again you can see the cloud structure up there in the sky. Now this is Albert Bierstadt. Bierstadt was a painter, a New York painter, and he was part of the Hudson River School. But he went out west and started painting a lot of Western scenes in the American West, and he is really famous for painting at unusual times of day, in unusual weather conditions, and early morning, late afternoon. And you can see just in this painting here that he's obviously captured it either a passing storm or very early morning, and you can see just from the lighting. But this painting is called the Rocky Mountains, and I saw it years ago in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. I walked in the door and there it was standing right in front of me. It's about 10 feet wide. The thing is gigantic. But it looked just incredible, and it was almost like you could put your hand out and reach into the painting. It looked so believable, almost like looking through a window. But Bierstadt's paintings are just spectacular. And as you'll see as we go through here, and again, here's one probably passing storm. You can see how he uses light and shade and draws your eye into the scene. And as we know, that your eye always goes to the brightest part of the scene first. So he draws you into the background, and then you start searching through as you come forward. Now, there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that in our cinematography. And the big advantage we've got now with digital is that we've got latitudes that can hold these sort of exposures. They can hold bright highlights up in the sky and still have detail, and dark shadows down in the foreground and still have detail. So what I want you to do is, as we're looking through these paintings, relate them back to what we've been talking about in terms of the characteristic curve, the latitude and the dynamic range of your cameras, and just think to yourself, well, how would I translate that scene onto whatever camera system I'm using? This is another one of the same painting, just a little bit tighter detail. And here's, obviously either sunrise or sunset with the sun beaming down a valley. Obviously Yosemite. And another one with passing storm. And you can see here again the way he uses light and shade to direct you all around the frame. And this is the sort of thing that we need to be planning into our cinematography as well, that when we go out and do day exteriors, we try to capture stuff like this. Now, obviously, we're not all going to be out in the Rocky Mountains in a passing storm and getting spectacular light like this. But what you do is you have that as part of your point of view and part of your background. And if this is the sort of thing you like, then this is what you try to aim for. And maybe you use grads, maybe you use time of day, but this is always in the back of your mind as the way you want to go. Now, like I said before we started this slideshow, this doesn't have to be your favorite painting. You'll have your own paintings that you like and you dislike, and that's what you build on. You don't have to build on the things that I like. Now we're on to Caravaggio, and as you can see, and I've talked about the difference between Caravaggio and Rembrandt. And you can see here the use of hard light with very dark, deep shadows and very little shadow detail. And whatever the light source is here, it's very hard, angular, and deep saturated blacks. And again here, obviously this one's light streaming through a window, and again the hard angular light, deep saturated blacks with very little shadow detail. Now on to Rembrandt, and remember my thoughts on Rembrandt were that he was in an environment where there was lots of smoke, whether it was smoke coming from the stove when they were cooking or from the open fireplaces. But as we look through here, you'll see that there's a lot of shadow detail, and the light coming through the windows now is not hard and angular, it's very soft and diffuse. And here, if you look at the gentleman sitting by the window and look at his shadow, it's very, very soft, diffused and blown out windows. And there's a lady down by the fireplace tending the fire, so obviously a little bit of smoke in the room, and obviously spreading around and causing that diffusion that got painted into the window. Now again, Rembrandt's exteriors get me all excited as well because of the use of light and shade and the way he directs you around the frame using highlights and shadows. This is a very famous Rembrandt painting called Night Watch. Now again here we're looking at really strict source lighting. So obviously the source light is on the table, and the people facing us are front lit, and the people with their backs to us are backlit, and very, very definite source lighting, and again lots of shadow detail. This one in particular, now here we've got a hard shadow, and the reason it's a hard shadow is they're lit by candlelight. And candlelight is a hard light, it's not a soft light. So there's a hard shadow going up the wall, obvious source lighting. The person facing us is front lit, and the person with their back to us is backlit. And again, a really good example of definite source lighting. But look at the use of latitude and relate that back to your camera. How would you capture that? And what sort of exposure range would you use from the brightest highlight, which is the book, and to the darkest shadows up there at the top of the stairs? But again, look through the scene, lots of shadow detail. Now we're on to Turner, and I won't labour on about Turner too much again, but Turner is my favourite for the use of just swirls of colour and lots of abstractions and texture and no real structure to his paintings, and I really like that. Like I said, if I could shoot everything like a Turner painting, I would be a really happy camper, but most audiences wouldn't appreciate that too much. Now this is Joel Meyerowitz. He's a New York photographer who spent a lot of time photographing on Cape Cod in New England, and this is from a book called Cape Light. Now again, I like this because of shooting at unusual times of day, and I keep mentioning that because I like to shoot as much as possible in unusual weather conditions. So if it's snowing, or there's a dust storm, or it's raining, or there's lightning storm, or there's big thick clouds rolling in, or it's very early morning, or it's very late at night, whatever it is, whatever the unusual conditions are, I really love. So on days when everyone wakes up and it's pouring rain and we're doing day exteriors, I get excited because to me, I would rather be out there shooting than saying, oh no, let's wait for another bright sunny day with clear blue skies. And again, I like the documentary feel of this. I like the use of unusual lighting and natural light. This is Nicholas Watts, who is a British painter, and he painted motorsports. And the thing I like about this is, again, getting into it's almost photorealism and a little bit of abstraction as well. But I like the fact that we've got a two-dimensional painting of a motor car and it looks like it's moving. And so I like the way he's captured a sense of speed. Even when you look at the spectators all give the sense of motion as well as the way he's painted it. But again, looking at contrast and latitude that he's used on here, Now, not so much as in the Bierstadt, but it's a different type of contrast and a different type of latitude. And the thing to look at is if someone says to you, okay, I want you to get a shot of Jack Brabham ripping around Brands Hatch in his Lotus Brabham in the 1960s, how would you photograph it? And this is what you might draw on. More Nicholas Watts at Le Mans, Monte Carlo. And then we come to Juan Carlos Ferrigno, and he's an Argentinian painter. And I like him because he does automobiles as well, but he goes a little bit more towards the Turner style, where it's a little bit more into abstraction. But still, one of the things I really like about him is the way he captures the sense of speed and the sense of motion. Now on to William Albert Allard, who photographed the American West, and he primarily photographed farmers and cowboys in action. And again, any sort of unusual conditions he loved, and his photographs show that. So smoke and dust and early morning, late at night, sunlight streaming through the window. I've used this shot a few times as motivation for some of my lighting, having a light screaming through a window and overexposing, and just letting the bounce light the rest of the scene. And again, the documentary feel and dust, and even though there's clear blue skies here, I like the sense that the image is a little bit messed up by the dust and the backlight and the smoke and all the rest of it. And then, of course, Ansel Adams, and again, unusual conditions, snow, fog, low clouds, and probably a passing snowstorm. But again, look at this and see how you would fit this into the latitude of your camera. If someone said, okay, I want you to capture Yosemite exactly like Ansel Adams, how would you do it? And more light and shade, light and shade. And here's another good example of exactly where do you place that exposure? Where do you put your highlights? Where do you put your shadows to get everything to read so that the mountain in the background is almost luminescent? And how did he achieve that? This is Alex Gottfried, and he's a British photographer who went to Venice and produced a series of photographs in the fog. So again, unusual weather conditions, and photographed all these shots in the fog in black and white, and has a real mood and ambience to it. And again, it's exactly that. He's created the mood by shooting this in those foggy conditions in black and white, and it creates a real ambience to the scenes. And once again, look at this, and how would you go about, let's just go back here, how would you go about capturing that on your camera? Where would you put your highlights? Where would you put your shadows? Now, obviously, this is very low contrast, so you're not going to use the full dynamic range of the camera or the full scope of the latitude of the camera, and you're only going to fit it all onto a small part of the straight line portion of the curve, but exactly where would you put it? Okay, so that's just to give you a little taste of what I like and give you an idea of the thought processes I go through when I'm looking at these things, so that I start to build up my own point of view and my own visual style. And all of this stuff contributes to it. If you notice through all these, there's one continuing theme, and that is shooting at unusual times of day, and anytime there's unusual weather conditions, making sure you shoot. And that's something that's part of my point of view, and my philosophy of lighting is I want to shoot in as many unusual conditions as possible. So rain, snow, fog, thunderstorms, lightning storms, dust storms, whatever it is, the more unusual the better, because the more interesting it makes the photography. So after looking through all that, I'll repeat one more time that whether all of those paintings and photographs appeal to you or not, it doesn't really matter. What I want you to do is look at the process that you've got to go through to build up your POV. And the important takeaways from this are, number one, you have to know who you are. You have to know what your POV is, because that's the integral part of your creativity. If you don't know what your POV is and who you are, then you can't come onto a set and be really creative. Then you come onto the set just as a recorder of what's in front of you, rather than a creator of the images that you're going to be photographing. The other thing is, it's important for you to develop that POV of the world, because that's what is going to allow you to develop your visual style. Now, whether it's your own personal visual style or the visual style of the project you're working on, either way, you need to build that visual style from your perspective of the world. So it's important to go out and look at all those elements that we've been talking about so that you can actually do that. And finally, you need to have a really good understanding of the POV that's required for the project, because once you know the POV of the project, then you can inject your POV and your visual style into that, and eventually that allows you to build a visual style that encompasses all the requirements of the screenplay, the director, and what you want to inject into the project as a creative artist. Okay, I hope that got your creative juices going, and you start to look at the things in your own personal world that that you could use to influence your POV. However you use this stuff, it is going to improve your cinematography way beyond anything you can imagine, and way beyond where it is at the moment, regardless of where you are. If you haven't done this before, it really is going to make an astounding difference. So once again, if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button down there and the notification bell so you get notices when new videos come online. If you like what you saw in this video, I'm always happy to receive a thumbs up. And once again, thanks for watching. See you soon.